Welcome to my channel. Today we have the cutest 3-drawer walnut mid-century modern dresser. I love dressers like this because they are really compact, but they can fit a lot of stuff in it because the drawers are just gigantic. So it's perfect for condo living, small apartments, or just to fill that awkward space in your home that you just need some storage, but you don't want a giant piece in. So I'm just scraping off all of that lacquer. The top surfaces of these dressers are always so hard to get off. This was actually a 3-piece set, but I refinished them all completely separately. There was a nightstand, this dresser, and I'm currently working on a 9-drawer, and the finish is just so difficult to get off on the top of the dresser, but the drawers and the sides are really not that bad. As you can see, I am just blasting through this drawer here. It is pretty satisfying to watch all of that finish just come right off. I have it on its side here so that I can easily scrape it. With lighter dressers like this, sometimes you just need to put your knee against the dressers because you can see it's moving a lot, but it's going to happen. It's just a light frame. There's nothing to weigh it down, so you just have to find a way to sort of stop it from moving as much as you can, even if you can get someone to hold it down for you. And as you can see, the side is also coming off really, really easily. I think they just put way less layers of lacquer on there because obviously it's not going to be as high traffic. I'm just covered in dust. I love it. As you can see, there's some damage here on the side, which I'm going to fix after. So I was just careful when I was scraping because I didn't want to make it any worse. It's just some missing strips of veneer, but nothing some filler and paint can't fix. Just scraping away. Just trying to get as much of that off as possible. The less that I have to hand sand off, the better, because you'd be surprised, even this small amount, especially when it's on a trim piece, which tend to be thinner, I like to just get as much off with the scraper as I can. As you can see, I actually left a good amount of the edge pieces of finish. They're always the hardest to do, so on this piece, because of the way that it was moving, I wasn't able to get enough leverage to do as much of the edge piece with the scraper as I would have liked. So I'm just going to have to carefully, slow and steady, sand that edge piece off. I'm just doing my hand sanding, just getting right under that ledge there. Usually I'll go back with the scraper and I'll sort of put it upside down and pop off as much of that finish close to the ledge as possible. Because of the area and how small it is, it's really difficult to get off all of the finish by hand. They're all sanded now and we're ready to put on some Danish oil. I'm using golden oak Danish oil, but you could also use natural, which just doesn't have any pigment added to it. I find that the pigment in this one is just very natural anyways, so it matches really well. I ended up with this one time because they were just sold out of the natural, and I actually ended up really liking it. So I've just kept rebuying it. I mean, I could probably switch back to the natural one. I just haven't yet. You know, when you just start using something and then you just like it so much, you just don't even think about it. You just keep buying the same one. But the last time I was in the hardware store, I saw the natural on the shelf and I grabbed that one. So we'll see how that goes. Once I'm finished with this one, I'll use that and see. I'll let you guys know if I like it or if it's any different at all. You can just see all of that grain popping out now that I'm putting on the oil. Oh, I literally love putting on Danish oil. It's my favorite step. You just get to see all of that beautiful color come to life and all of your hard work pay off, sanding and scraping the thing. Oh, it's the best part. It's like a little reward for all your hard work. It doesn't really matter what direction you put it on, but I do like to go sort of following the grain, and then I'll go along the edge. Because it's on a sponge, sometimes when you're doing the edge, you can get some drips going downwards. So I try not to press too hard so that all the product doesn't just come out of the sponge and run down the side of the dresser. Even though you are going to apply more, I don't like any areas to sit with it on it in random spots before I get to it, just in case it leaves some sort of weird discoloration. If it can happen, it will happen with these vintage pieces. I've had so many random things happen that you just would not think would even be an issue, and I just take all the precautions I can now. And just getting the sides done. As you can see with these pieces, they are really, this piece, and I say pieces because the other pieces in this set also, they're really well made. They're by a well-known company, and the veneer that's used is really high quality. The color is very even. It's beautiful. It's this warm red, brown, orangey wood. Sometimes you get walnut pieces that are not so nice, and I'll usually just use a darker colored Danish oil to sort of even out the tone of everything and make sure the final product looks nice and professional. Because when you're not using lacquer, you'll see all the variations in the color, which a lot of people love, and honestly I love too, but I don't want a gray tone brown and a warm tone brown right next to each other, and sometimes that happens with lower quality MCM walnut veneer pieces. So as you can see, this is where I did the wood filler. When I put the wood filler on, I just put a little bit extra. I make sure I really fill the area, and then I hand sand it off, or I sand it off with the sander while I'm doing my sanding. Usually I do all my wood filling after I do my scraping. That way it can get sanded during the sanding stage, which is after the scraping stage. I use a teak colored wood filler, so when it gets wet with the Danish oil, it actually has a very warm color to it. I find that the walnut colored wood filler, in this brand at least, was a very gray color when I would do this stage. So I switched over and did the teak one for walnut and teak, and I find it works a lot better. But I've started just covering it and green painting anyways, so it really doesn't matter what kind of wood filler you use if you're going to cover it with paint either way. The drawers are always nice and easy because they're just a flat surface. They're easy for applying Danish oil, and they're easy for applying poly because you don't have to worry about any drips. It's just sitting flat, so you can apply more and get a nice even finish, and it's not going to drip all over the place, whereas you have to be a little bit more careful when you're working on the body of the dresser, specifically the sides and edges. The handles are bare because I'm actually going to be painting them. They're also bare because I sort of wasn't sure 100% what I was going to do, and I ended up scraping them, so I just gave them a quick sanding to make sure everything was even and no weird marks were going to show through the paint. You can still see some of the finish on there, but I just made sure that they were nice and even so it didn't feel rough to the touch, so you didn't see all bumps through the paint. This is all of the Danish oil applied. So once you apply the Danish oil, you apply another coat after 30 minutes, and then you let it sit for 15, and then you wipe away all the excess. If it's very hot outside, the Danish oil sometimes starts to set up a little bit quicker. Not that it's dry, it's just a little bit tacky. So just make sure you get all of that excess off, so as it's drying, there's no excess oil pooling on the surface that's going to leave little dots. I have it all wrapped up so that I can spray paint the legs. They didn't come off. That's why I'm doing it this way. Usually I would take them off. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes people glue them on. I don't know why. Don't ask me. I wasn't there. I'm just scuff sanding the bar. This bar was This bar was attached crooked to the bottom. Somebody screwed it in crooked. So when we reattached it, we essentially just screwed it in straight. It's not that difficult, but it looks a lot better now. I'm just scuffing up the legs, just with like a 220, just to make sure they have, take the shine down a little bit. Also, there's always like some kind of like white paint, other scuffs, little scratches and dents, especially on the legs. So I just want to even all of that out before I spray paint it. I'm not expecting my legs on my dressers to be 100% perfect. They're vintage pieces. They're always going to have little bumps and dents and stuff. So if you're painting with a spray paint over top of that and you can see a little bit through, honestly, don't worry about it that much because you do not even notice it overall. I'm using like an espresso colored spray paint. It sort of has like a matte to satin finish on it. So it's not really shiny at all, but when you look at it, it's also not like super flat. it's in between, a little bit less shiny than what a satin finish in the poly is. And I really like this dark color because when it's on the legs, it just gives like a depth to the piece, and I think it really complements the shape. It's going to be a little bit of a darker brown than my handles because my handles, I somehow lost all of the clips of my handles being painted, but it was really just one clip of me painting them, so it's not that much to see anyways. I essentially just taped off the drawers with some saran wrap to protect them, and I painted the handles a medium brown. Here's me just putting the base back on. As you can see, we are now going to paint all of these areas that I had the filler, and you'll see it turns out amazing. My skills at wood grain painting have definitely improved over time. You'll see in one of my future videos, I was just working on a piece and the amount of veneer that was missing on this bottom bar was outrageous. And I even impressed myself with how well the grain painting turned out. You'll have to stay tuned for that one. But even this, look, it's a really awkward shape. And I just think the most important thing is getting a color match for the base color, because you can always add sort of grain colors into it, whether that be lighter colors and darker colors. You just do sort of little ticks, and then you can even use your finger to blend it out, and it'll just sort of blend, especially if you have all the right colors that are already in the grain. So this is an acrylic paint. It's just like an artist paint. I don't use oil paint for this kind of filling because this paint, it's acrylic. It dries very, very quickly, whereas oil paint does not. You want it to dry really quickly because I can do poly over this in about an hour or less, whereas if it was oil paint, it would take forever to dry. I'm just using sort of like a little pointed brush. Just grab anything that you feel like would give you some precision. And I'm just painting along where it is, and then sometimes I use my fingers to blend it a little bit. But yeah, try your best and play with it, and you can always layer up and add more as you go. Because it dries so quickly, you can just keep layering colors on top of it, so it doesn't need to be perfect the first time around. Look at that. It actually blends so well, and it looks even better when it's sealed with this poly here. This is a white bond poly. I like the white bond poly because I can just apply a bunch of thin layers, and it's a little bit better, at least in my opinion, because it doesn't sort of streak right away. At least it's a little bit more forgiving. If I had to use a brush to apply poly, I think there'd just be streaks everywhere. This also just like settles into the grain. It has nice self-leveling because it's more of a liquid, and I'm applying it over top of what is essentially raw wood, so it's going to suck into some areas more than others, especially on the first coat. You're going to need 2 to 3 coats. I usually do 3 coats on the tops. For the edges here, I just make sure that I get enough product right under the lip there, so I go back and forth a little at the beginning, and then I just drag it down. See that little wiggle at the top? That's just to make sure that it sinks into the grain up there. And I'm just applying like a light pressure as I go down to get the poly sort of out of the sponge. I also just keep it in this little tin. You can get these at like the dollar store. They're amazing just to hold poly or whatever. And when I do my Danish oil, I keep them in little glasses, and I reuse the glasses. You can just wipe them out with the cloth that you're using to remove the Danish oil, like right after you're done. So you can just keep reusing them time after time. Poly is a little more sticky and yucky, so I only use this maybe 2 or 3 times, and then I'll get a new one. I also sometimes just wrap this foam brush up here in between coats, and I just wrap it with saran wrap, so keep it from getting all hard. And then when the 2 hours or 3 hours are up, I can still use the same thing. You can also put the excess poly left in the container here back into the can. Just make sure you don't spill it everywhere, and just create like a little funnel. And as I said before, super easy to do the drawers because it's a flat surface. Just make sure you get under the handle. And then I just go and do nice even strokes all the way along, just to make sure there are no weird puddles. All the poly is on. It's nice because it's a small piece, so it doesn't take so long. Here you can see everything's ready for the next coat. They're looking good, nice and blended. Here you can see how it almost looks like there could be little like drips, but don't worry, when that starts to dry, it really isn't like a drip shape. You just have to make sure that as it's drying, you're like going back over it. I'm using some steel wool to buff in between coats. You can see that powder there means that it is dry. If you go to do this and it's still tacky, you will know, because it will not create this powder. It will feel sticky. Look how pretty. This is how I stage it in front of my garage with some nice modern carpets. It looks beautiful. The grain is so nice. Look at this. This is the color of brown I painted the handles. It looks a little lighter in this lighting, but it's like a medium brown. The fill looks amazing. The grain looks amazing. This piece I bought for $100 and I'm hoping to sell it for $450. It's a little bit less refinishing because it's smaller, so it was a bit pricey for what I would usually spend on a piece, but this set was very competitive to get, and somebody ended up offering the seller a lot more money, and I really wanted it, so I just bit the bullet. So that's why I spent a bit more than I usually would, but sometimes you just got to do that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.